本当？見えないでしょ？どこにいるのかな？見えないよ。
What's good, Internet? It's September 9th, and you are listening to the 506th Waypoint Radio Podcast. I'm your host, Rob Zachney, and I'm joined by Ricardo Contreras.
Hi.
Ricardo Contreras.
The startled Ricardo Contreras.
They know their name.
What? I said hello. Did Discord cut me off?
It was a long delay, is all I'm saying. There's just a Ricardo Contreras and just like sort of a stare at the camera.
I think I was trying to come up with something witty on the spot, and my brain short-circuited. I'm sorry about that.
Ricardo was thinking.
Yeah. I went to... So who's in the 506 battalion of...
Well,
remember that bit from the 501st?
Well, no. So the 506th Regiment is the 500. Yeah. So Band of Brothers, that regiment, the 101st Airborne, 506 PIR, Easy Company. I consider myself Captain Winters of Waypoint. And yeah, everyone's shaking their head.
Do you want to elaborate on that? No. Hey, Rob, do you want to elaborate on that?
Oh, just the stabilizing backbone of the outfit, the sort of mentor and dare I say, like, beloved uncle figure of the team. I think that's basically. I think that's where I fit.
And that's really good, because that's what I say about you. People ask me, Renata, what's your job like? And I say, well, every day I go in and there's the classic beloved uncle of Waypoint, Rob Zachney, there to guide us into the night.
Uncle Rob.
Yep, gotta lead this company into a variety of campaigns with diverse outcomes. Helping me on that journey, Patrick Klepek.
Never saw the Pacific. Band of Brothers, one of my all-time favorite shows. The buzz on Pacific was kind of mixed, and I just never got around to it. But I feel bad because I've heard it's actually better than some of the reception it got when it came out.
The Pacific's interesting, is what I will say. I think it has some of the highest highs. Like there's points where it's like thin red line like levels of bleakness and existential horror about like a campaign that has no coherence. Just like combat without context and violence without meaning. There's times where it's like really good on that stuff, but the problem is it's synthesizing like 2 or 3 different works, and
it seemed like it didn't have the characters. Like the whole reason Band of Brothers was so special was because the scenarios, whatever, it was incredibly shot, but like the characters were so. I mean, I felt like you were watching like Saving Private Ryan, the TV show. Like it had the same. And obviously Spielberg was a producer on both, but have those been remastered in 4K? I feel like that's what would get me to finally watch
That's
the
a
Pacific.
Great question. It feels like I don't think they have been.
I know they got Blu-ray releases, but...
Right. 4K, did that come out? Yeah, it doesn't look like it has happened.
Because that would be my impetus to finally go and watch that. Was like, okay, if I'm going to watch a show to capture a little bit of that Band of Brothers magic, maybe at least in 4K. So, we'll try and will that into the world.
We're also joined, of course, by Renata Price. Ren, are you also refreshing High Def Digest and Blu-ray.com to see if the Pacific and Band of Brothers are coming out in 4K?
I can't say that's what I've been. That's what I've been refreshing as of late.
High Def
I've
Digest,
been refreshing an anime merch site.
That goes all the way back, right? That's like early DVD era, right?
I guess it depends on how you define the DVD era, but it does feel like Band of Brothers was another one of those, like,
yes,
everyone got that steel
that tin box set. Yes,
for sure,
yes,
for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel like for some reason that I think because they came out the same year, the Fellowship of the Ring I feel like came out that same fall as Band of Brothers, and both of those were like instant purchases for DVD. Like in subsequent years, and I don't think I ever got Band of Brothers on Blu-ray.
I did. I have not rewatched it, but I upgraded my DVD set just because I Not because I had any intention of rewatching it, but it is like just but one of my all-time favorite watches is Band of Brothers. I was like, you know, it was one of those things where it was like on a flash sale, and it was like, do you want this for $25? It's like, yeah, okay, sure, fine.
Yeah, I watched it so much like in college that I haven't felt the need to, because it was like one of those things that people just had on all the time.
Yeah.
Let's watch that. Let's cry over like the end of Band of Brothers with the guys like all saying goodbye to each other. Let's get real fucked up over like the one where Neil McDonough's character sees like Bill Garnier get hit by a shell and just has his final like breaking point in the episode, helpfully titled "Breaking Points."
Oh, you think that it's good that they made it clear to everybody?
Wow.
This is also yes, and let me tell you, there's another episode called Crossroads, and let me tell you where the combat of that episode occurs and where the characters find themselves metaphorically in that episode.
Powerful.
What a fucking show, though. Here's the problem. All that stuff, like, that's corny as hell. And I'm like, it's amazing. Shit.
The epic melodrama. It rules.
Exactly. And melodrama fucking whips. It's so good. It's so good and fun when well executed.
I guess we're coming off a long weekend here, and I'm hoping we all found time to get on our bullshit. One thing I did to this point, one thing I did this weekend, in addition to watching Prometheus, which I felt like ended the vacation prematurely. I was like, time to watch Prometheus.
Getting the Sunday scaries. Time to watch Prometheus.
God.
But another thing that I started to do for a side project, I had to watch Saving Private Ryan, which I've not seen in like at least 10, 15 years, in part because like that's a movie that's just one of those things where I feel like there's a hurdle you got to get over. You got to really like summon the am I in the Saving Private Ryan headspace? Like, am I in the headspace to see the Omaha Beach scene?
Yeah, you have to get over such a visceral introduction.
Yeah. Or like the medic bleeding out while everyone's like trying to save him. Like, there's a lot of stuff.
A man looking for his legs on the beach. Jesus Christ.
Yeah. Ren finds this funny. Oh, this is amusing to Ren. Ren likes it. Ren likes it when the troops run into a prepared position that's pre-sighted by German artillery, and they all get fucked up.
I think it's good, actually.
Ren's sad when the Germans are driven off that beach.
I didn't say that.
She's like, no, the machine gun nest was doing so good. Their kill streak was epic.
KDR.
I mean, listen, to be fair, they did have a really good KD. Like the people on those beach emplacements were doing well.
Yeah, Spielberg knew this.
Number went up.
It's weird. The director's cut actually does have like a kill counter running in the lower left.
Jesus.
The Germans unlock an airstrike, but then Eisenhower cancels it. It's weird.
I think that the oddest part of that movie for me is when Private Ryan is saved at the very end and he's the last one standing, and then he goes, "#1 victory royale. Yeah, Fortnite, we're about to get down. 10 kills on the board right now." And then he looks around him and he looks at the counter in the bottom right, and the director's cut, and he goes, "Oh wait, fuck! It was actually 43." And then the movie ends.
Damn. I mean, Spielberg did put those. He did take those. He took those guns out of ET, so he could do anything.
True.
Coward.
I know. Oh yeah. I grew up and I'm sad now. I'm a parent. Fuck off, Spielberg.
Bro.
Bruh.
Wouldn't want people to think cops carry guns needlessly and threateningly in this great nation of ours.
God.
But yeah, so I ended up watching that, and that's sort of the precursor to Band of Brothers. But it was one of those things where I was talking about this the other day on Twitter. It's like I went through this with Jaws, which is a movie I watched for the first time in ages at the start of the pandemic, because that was kind of the metaphor for a situation a lot of us were in. And I do feel like Spielberg's one of those guys where he's such a popular artist that's easy to forget how solidly constructed these works are, because they just become like tropey, right? And it's like, like it gets, everyone knows the scenes that get referenced. They know the highlights, but they also know the movies that kind of come along and rip the stuff off later. They know the lesser imitators, but then you actually like watch a Spielberg work in context, see the whole thing. You're like, wow, it is a really fine line this dude consistently walks between being like suspenseful, scary, like touching, and also kind of bleak. And it's a real juggling act he pulls off with a lot of these films. And Saving Private Ryan was one I'd forgotten just how much more complicated that movie is in a lot of ways than what I remember, which was basically a Stephen Ambrose like rah rah we love the troops movie.
I mean, like, I think that it's very easy with like high spectacle films to, I think people have a tendency to mistake subtlety for depth, and kind of treat like high spectacle films as inherently shallow. And I think that a lot of that like ends up hitting like Spielberg, who does make a lot of high spectacle films. Yeah.
I think that's true. And I think to be fair, like it's one of those things where watching the movie, I was like, there might actually be a little more subtlety here than I remember, but it's in part because I think some of the messages that film got really lost like on release, because that movie just got sort of seamlessly woven into a lot of like Greatest Generation retrospective stuff. And to be fair, he invites that with those fucking corny intro and outro sequences that bookend the film. But like you actually watch the movie and so much more of it's about like, hey, this is like entirely a movie about like people being afraid of like losing their humanity in war. And we see like our heroes doing a lot of genuinely horrible stuff and really becoming hardened in some ugly ways. And that's just not how I remember that movie. I remember it being a lot more like what these men went through for our freedom. And you watch the movie and it's a lot like, wow, these guys are all getting kind of weirdly sadistic at this point. Like,
and the last time I saw that movie, I was so young. I saw that movie. That was a event movie because, well, Spielberg made a war movie. Time to go see that in the theater. You like Jurassic Park, right? You know what I mean? Like he was doing that period where he was doing some pretty interesting swings between his spectacle work and, Schindler's List is the same era. Like it's just, he used his capital to do some really interesting things and like walked an incredibly fine line as a filmmaker that almost is interesting because I think you can see the tension between him wanting to be. You see this in a lot of his work where he wants to be two different kinds of filmmaker and then gets kind of trapped under the blockbuster stuff. But he still does really cool stuff, even though he's making things meant for like a really wide tent of an audience.
I'll have to, I'll see if I can pull it up right now, but Matthew Wise, who's I think professor at NYU and has written some stuff for us before I wrote a Resident Evil piece for us a while ago, but he sent me a piece. It was a negative review from the time that was also sort of a joint review between this and a movie I had forgotten completely that it existed. Small Soldiers. Patrick, does this ring a bell?
Yes. The shit. Who's in that? It's a kids movie. It's directed by Joe Dante.
Right.
Who's responsible for Gremlins. Gremlins 2, a bunch of other stuff that unfortunately it's not coming off the top of my head, but
Inner Space.
Matinee.
Yes. He did Matinee.
Yeah.
Okay.
He had a fun run. And Small Soldiers is supposed to be, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know what this piece is about. It's essentially like, it's way more interesting than how it was marketed as like a kid's toy. Like, it's got not Tom Hanks, but it had like a really named actor as its central characters, and actually there's more going on beneath the surface of Small Soldiers.
This review is by Jonathan Rosenbaum, and it's a pretty negative review of Saving Private Ryan, but I guess I hadn't realized that like these were released, I guess, in the same window, but I guess also Joe Dante was basically sponsored professionally by Spielberg.
Yes.
For a lot of his career, and one of the arguments here is that like if you look for a place where Spielberg's more critical conscience exists, like apart from his work as a filmmaker, it's in sponsoring these movies that in so many ways are like kind of dark reverses of like the Spielbergian works that they're kind of responding to. And so Small Soldiers, was marketed as, oh, it's these toys are coming to life and they're getting up to all sorts of hijinks. And what gets lost in that is these toys are a metaphor for the United States military and their role in a violent, and colonial, American conception of itself and power. And like they're actually it's kind of borderline a horror movie, right? And they're there to hunt down this other set of toys. And I'd completely forgotten that that movie existed. It was a really interesting lens through which to view Saving Private Ryan was through this work. So the title of the article is Cutting Heroes Down to Size, Small Soldiers and Saving Private Ryan, and it's by Jonathan Rosenbaum. It's a really interesting critical read, and also just a really interesting way of doing criticism. I feel like this is a format that existed largely because of newspapers and alt weeklies and magazines, where you would have in one layout multiple reviews, but sometimes you could play around with this idea of tying the two reviews together. And this is a really excellent approach to that.
Yeah, I think it's a form that has extremely fallen out of favor, but occasionally gets used in video essays. Video essays do this specific structure a lot, actually, of the interweaving of two particular media objects in conversation with one another. I think it's a really cool formal trick you can do.
Yeah, I can see why it's fallen out. It doesn't make any sense, right? This is a format that makes perfect sense to the physical medium of a newspaper or a magazine, but the minute everything is a separate URL and can be sort of hived off like that, you see less utility for it, and it does require some real creativity to make these things fall into dialogue neatly like this. But anyway, so that was my weekend, except for some games. Anyone else get really down a rabbit hole? Patrick, do you put your spooky boy up yet?
The spooky boy's up. I cannot. It has been the emergence of Jackson Bones in the front yard has been quite literally utterly heartwarming. We have people coming from all over the neighborhood. I've been recognized twice as hey, because I'm always walking my dog. And are you the one with the big skeleton? And I was yes. And it's oh, is it okay if my two boys come by later today and take a picture in front of it? I was yes. Yeah, of course. It's just really neat, to have this little, it has brought a lot of people a lot of joy. And that is a cool thing. And I mean, part of that is because it's big and a spectacle. Another part is because it's September 7th. And although the stores may be converting to Halloween, people's yards haven't quite done that. And so it's just, kind of noteworthy to see on the front lawn, but it has been worth every bit of the $300 has been worth. We had this giant soccer tournament down the street, and so the streets were just lined with people over Labor Day weekend. On both sides of the street, people going in and out, and so usually we try and get out of town specifically because of that weekend. It makes just getting around the neighborhood a nightmare. But we just happened to be in town this weekend, and every night, we'd be watching TV and you would just hear people giggling next to Jackson Bones. And so it's been very cool. I could not be happier. And in fact, all it's done is now started to pick at an impulse to, Jackson needs a family. What else can I put out there? But I haven't quite. The problem is so many things, Halloween things that would equally match Jackson's spectacle are not meant for the outdoors. So many things are meant for the indoors. There's Costco does have this dueling banjo setup. It's these two dorks that talk to each other and play music, and it's awesome. I've looked at it a bunch of times, and it would be really hilarious to have that next to
Do
Jackson.
They actually play dueling banjos?
Yeah, it's great. And then have these dumb one-liners they spit back and forth at each other. But it's
everyone loves the hijinks of Deliverance.
Well, speaking of cultural objects that lose their meaning over time.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's meant for the indoors. It can't survive the rain. But yeah, that is a lot of me slowly peeking my head over my couch so I can see the cute things that are happening with the skeleton, but also trying not to make anyone feel bad that I'm looking. So it's as much as I want to see the delightful family interactions, I also don't want people to feel like I'm scolding them for. I need to like put up a sign that's like, I'm okay with you interacting with.
This is what gets Patrick on the ring train.
Oh no.
I'm so thrilled about the skeleton and the joy it has brought you in your life.
Yes, me too.
Yeah, no, it was a good break, and I don't know how it is where you are, Patrick. Like, I feel like this last weekend's been the very first, like, just taste a little bit of autumn in the air out here in the east, and it's like I'm so parched for fall, and so like I'm like if you like the minute
you love your sweaters. Have you already taken them out?
I did the other day. I was like, here we go. It's
I could have seen that being a Labor Day project for Rob. Is finally the sweaters are out. You know, maybe you've got one or two for the couple of chilly days you get weirdly in August that like you can convince yourself to put on.
Sort of stay out, just in case you need to throw on an extra layer. But this was the first. Actually, the sweaters didn't come out. What came out was the like really warm like sweatpants that I've got. The ones that are like a slightly denser knit and a little baggier, so that you end up in that like little warm pocket around yourself that's like perfect.
Nice.
And like that's real good, especially in my apartment, because it's not very well like temperature controlled. There are thermal layers, and so like down from like the mid thigh down to your feet, it's considerably cooler down there than it is like up where the rest of you is.
Sure.
And so you'll have days where it's like your legs are cold and achy, and also you're kind of like sweltering up by the collar.
Jesus.
It's very annoying, but it does make it perfect for throwing on clothes like that. So you know, let's get caught up, because we had a few days off, and there was some real news that unfolded over the last week. Really, I feel like it crescendoed fast toward the end of last week and into this weekend. Patrick, you want to talk about like what has gone on and the current status of the right-wing hate site Kiwi Farms?
Yeah, so in the past couple of days, Cloudflare, which essentially provides like DDoS support for websites, was essentially you can try and bring down a site with fake traffic by having bots just overwhelm a website. It's a very common thing in earlier times in the internet, where it was just very easy to bring down a lot of websites. And, you know, organizations like Cloudflare have been pretty important for like the stable foundation of the modern internet. And so to that degree, Cloudflare has done a lot of good in making websites just more reliable and less targeted by, you know, groups who can easily use bots to take them down. But they were also giving a lot of protection for websites like Kiwi Farms. In the past, Cloudflare has also been under criticism for hosting 8chan, or protecting rather 8chan and the Daily Stormer, to right-wing hate sites, so across a whole spectrum of hate. And this sort of reached a crescendo with a trans streamer on Twitch, popularly goes by Keffels, Clara Sorrenti, and Keffels, you know, I had not really heard of Keffels prior to this incident, but they kind of became popularized, from my understanding, by doing a very good job of dunking on conservatives and libertarian weirdos like Destiny, who was also a very popular Twitch streamer who was like the debate me bro crowd. Brendan, did you have something you wanted to say? And Keffels was, as many trans people have experienced through Kiwi Farms, became a target. Kiwi Farms, over the years, its history dates back, 10, 15 years, is essentially a repository for doxing. There are individual threads on this place that are meant to categorize personal information about individuals that the site has decided to target. Those individuals are numerous. They include yours truly. I only feel comfortable saying this because the site is at least down right now, but have received things in the mail. My wife has been harassed. Normally I don't talk about these things because all you get when you talk about Kiwi Farms is that they linger on you longer. And so,
well, as this campaign started to unfold, that was one of the real through lines, is that like even within like journalistic outfits that cover the for lack of a better word, the hate beat, the extremism beat.
Yeah.
There's been a real reticence to stay on Kiwi Farms, in part because, one, they appear to be bulletproof, like nothing ever knocked them offline, and two, the like swarming reaction from that forum to anyone who sort of raised its profile to criticize it meant that like the risk and reward, just in terms of like personal danger you were exposing yourself and your family to, was not worth, and that became like semi-official guidance to a lot of people working in this space, was, this is probably not worth getting into because the reporting on it is probably not going to change anything, but it will change your life.
Yes. And they had a long history of not just targeting individuals, but specifically targeting people close to those individuals in their surrounding social orbits, family and friends, because that was one of the more effective ways to apply silencing pressure on people, is to have your rhetoric, comment, have real world impacts on the people in your lives. That's a great way to get people to shut the fuck up. And I can attest to it. It is a great way to not say anything about that site in the hopes that they won't continue poking around. Go ahead. And
just to make like there's a term that like it comes up a lot around like right wing extremism, but it's a really useful way of thinking about this stuff. This idea of like stochastic terrorism, which is that not necessarily people are calling for direct action type stuff like I want to or you should like go and like do this horrible thing to this person, but just this idea of you create a repository for a lot of actionable data, and then you speak about it in terms that are inflammatory but not necessarily directly like direct incitement. And then what do you know, like a bunch of horrible and dangerous things happen around that rhetoric. But you can't say that like a place like this is a place where this kind of harassment is organized or incited. All people here are doing is giving you all the information you would need to carry out like harassment campaigns or violent attacks, and then sort of proclaiming loudly how much they wish things like this happened to these targets that they've identified and carefully created like encyclopedic knowledge of their lives and their connections. And that's always been sort of the fig leaf that a lot of like extremist communities hide behind. And also was kind of a fig leaf that Cloudflare was certainly happy to hide behind for a long time.
Most social networks, right? Is
hateful
that
speech?
Yep.
I don't know, but it's speech.
Yeah, and without any regulatory agency, without any law enforcement agency, following up on this, it leaves us in a place where people are then directing their interest. If you believe these places shouldn't exist or should be taken down, is directing your attention towards what they call like the internet stack, the different plays that are sort of like the foundational parts of what make the modern internet work. And what Kevils did was the opposite of what most people do, the opposite of what I do, like pretty much anyone else that has like come in contact with Kiwi Farms, is they said, I'm going to stare you in the eye and turn this into the reverse. I am going to target you. We are going to take down your website. And saying that is one thing. Lots of people have tried campaigns against Kiwi Farms. Like Kevils is not the first. Like this is thank God it proved more successful, but it not the first person that has said we should take this website down. It kind of became this perfect storm. And I think part of this is because of the existence of things like Twitch, where you can very rapidly create communities that can then do, in the same way that Kiwi Farms, does in a way trying to incite death by suicide and other sorts of potential actions, is you can mobilize people very, very quickly using things like Twitch. And so what Keffels did was like organize hashtags and begin talking to news outlets, and specifically started identifying what is allowing Kiwi Farms to exist. And it turns out it was basically the fact that Cloudflare was protecting them and giving them all these different sort of like internet level service protection that it affords to lots of websites that deserve that protection. But this one is like, essentially we don't have there's no internet cop. And so unfortunately, yes, maybe in an ideal world, you don't have this part of the internet stack being asked to make content moderation. I don't know that necessarily this isn't ideal, but at the end of the day, the only thing keeping Kiwi Farms operational was this. And if you flipped it off, it doesn't make Kiwi Farms go away, but neither 8chan didn't go away, the Daily Stormer didn't go away, but they essentially are like banished to the deep, like the dark web, and you have to jump through enormous hoops in order to get to them. And that is essentially a form, like the closest we can get to like true deplatforming on the modern internet. And like Cloudflare essentially tried to like argue they shouldn't be in this position. Like they put out a blog post a week ago saying, actually, when we took, they kind of implied like actually when we did 8chan and Daily Storm, we're like, I don't know, maybe that wasn't the right call. And which seemed to be setting up that they wouldn't take action on this. But eventually they published a post that essentially said what you were talking about, Rob, where a lot of these communities, these hateful communities, rely on suggestion and innuendo, but not direct action. Well, what Keffels did was essentially drive these people crazy. And like when pinned into a corner and felt like they were finally the cornered animals, what they did was overreact, and they started taking direct actions. They started writing down that there were going to be bomb threats called in, like they started doing the sorts of things that is normally the cover for these places. And that ended up being their undoing. It ended up being the justification Cloudflare used for ultimately removing their protections and essentially driving Kiwi Farms offline. And then you have actions in connection to that, which are the Internet Archive also took down the archives. They don't actually delete them. The Internet Archive still has, my understanding, is an archive, but it is now like a true archive where like you need to have a justifiable reason to access this history of the internet as opposed to just being able to pull it up. And we didn't mention this up at the top, but one of the reasons Kiwi Farms, other than just making people feel scared and for having their information out there, even if nothing notable comes of it, just knowing that like your address is listed in somewhere and you can report it to Google and they'll do nothing about it. There have been 3 people over the course of Kiwi Farms' lifetime, in which part of what Kiwi Farms does is specifically target marginalized folks and specifically targets trans folks to try and drive them to take their lives. And there have been 3 instances linked directly to Kiwi Farms. One, which I have a pretty close connection with, which is that last year I wrote a profile of Near, who is a really famous SNES emulator programmer who prized doing accuracy over like all encompassing. Like Near was very committed to really trying to recreate to like an incredible degree, like what was this hardware? How can we recreate it? And like there are so many things about modern emulation that do not exist without Near's work. And I did this piece about how Near was one of Near's last projects was this SNES RPG from Square, Bomb at Lagoon, that never came out, was never localized outside of Japan. And as a result of that piece, like part of it was talking about the sort of unending harassment that Near had experienced. They were very cautious to even discuss it with me because they knew that including it in an article, just as we've discussed, would mean that would just be increased. It's just a target on their back again. And then not long after I wrote that piece, Near published a series of tweets that specifically called out Kiwi Farms as being responsible for, essentially leading them to take their own life. One of the tweets that Near wrote back in June of 2021. Kiwi Farms has made the harassment orders of magnitude worse. It's escalated from attacking me for being autistic to attacking and doxing my friends and trying to suicide bait one another just to get a reaction. I lost one of my best friends to this. I feel responsible. Please don't remember me for this. Remember me for what I've done, for my work and dedication. Thank you all so much for your kindness and support over the years. I'm very sorry. And this was an instance in which someone who then did take their life specifically called out Kiwi Farms. And I had an instance during all of this where these tweets went out and then I was one of the last people to talk to Nier before this event occurred, and also in the middle of the night, I'm frantically sending emails after these tweets went out to see if I could even reach them, so other friends could get in touch. And tragically, that did not occur. But there is a solace I take in Keffel's work since then, a vindication of sort of the plea that Nier put out there that there will be other places. Like, this is not like a victory that changes the internet, but just fuck that place and fuck those people. And it's incredibly satisfying to watch them crawl away into their new holes. And, I hope wherever Nier is, it brings them some peace, because Keffels has done really good work that is going to save other people, save lives, and save just an enormous amount of hurt that was going to come one way or the other.
Yeah, it's kind of surprising. It's one of those things where, again, Kiwi Farms seemed effectively immortal as far as facing these sorts of consequences, because baked into the assumptions of so many internet startups, but also internet services companies, is sort of a really hard-hearted libertarianism. It's
the old utopian philosophy of the internet, and that has now run into practical realities of how terrible people can be.
Right, and also, it's a very self-serving. It's a principle that's very profitable to uphold, and like a lot of principles that cause like significant social harm, after a certain point, the harm itself becomes like a sort of perverse vindication of how valuable the principle is. Look at all the lives we're willing to throw on the pyre for the sake of these principles. But Cloudflare had like been pretty adamant for a long time that they weren't going to take any action, even as domain registrars were increasingly getting leery of the company. And it is kind of remarkable to see how this all unfolded. But it's also kind of, tragically ironic in some ways that it was the site being the most Kiwi Farms it could be, reacting to this pressure in exactly the way that people like this would react, being exactly who they are, that finally, forced even a company like Cloudflare to do the right thing and take them offline. And I still sort of, certainly the person who's basically run Kiwi Farms for years, Joshua Moon, has sort of made statements that it doesn't seem likely that Kiwi Farms is going to be able to be brought back online. But I still kind of dread the possibility that like someone's willing to invest in the infrastructure to specifically keep these types of extremist sites online. There is history, I recommend there's an excellent sort of like internet culture newsletter called Garbage Day that is one of my favorite reads every week, and one of the most recent ones about Kiwi Farms discussed like one of the earlier versions of a Kiwi Farms website was Encyclopedia Dramatica, which was like essentially a wiki that chronicled similar thing. It was maybe I was around in that era, but not familiar with the website. But it essentially was like a prototype for what Kiwi Farms would become. And Dramatica was deplatformed in a similar sort of way, where the only way the archives are being kept were like these torrents, and eventually it gets old and people get bored, and that site just doesn't exist anymore, and the archives have all disappeared. And so our best hope is that the same fate awaits Kiwi Farms, but the problem. This doesn't solve fundamental like structural issues with how we deal with this extremist elements of the internet. It's not that I want the government to get into the necessarily like wading into the speech category, but like, I don't know what the good solution is. It is probably, the internet stack just realizing that you are responsible for some of this. I don't know what the solutions are. Otherwise, I'm not really confident law enforcement's going to suddenly catch up and be able to figure this stuff out, but it is unfortunately probably going to rely on campaigns to deplatform these places, because I genuinely don't really see what the alternative is, even if that's like kind of upsetting and depressing, because you would hope this opens the door to
whatever would be a more tangible solution. But maybe the solution is like places like Cloudflare trying to hide behind these bullshit impartial statements when like they've been bullshit all along. And so I think the faster that companies realize they are going to be held to account for that, the faster that these places where they do spring up cannot become as long-standing as a Kiwi Farms. And it's still whack-a-mole, but that's just always going to be the case.
Yeah, I mean, there was a report today, from David Gilbert over at Vice News, talking about that they're trying to find basically an even more right-wing version of Cloudflare that is willing to try and keep Kiwi Farms online, which I think is kind of my dread, which is that, as you see right-wing extremism getting increasingly like mainstreamed and organized, you will see them sort of creating this kind of infrastructure that is pointedly immune to these lines of critique,
right?
Simply because they like having this type of content up, they like having these sort of like pools to recruit from, and they like seeing bad things happen.
New Zealand, in response to the Christchurch shooting, they looked at this and said, like, Kiwi Farms is a problem. How do we get it taken down? Realized they couldn't, and then, I mean, this is one solution. I'm not advocating, but on an ISP level, they passed a law. My understanding is that like just regionally blocks, like you just can't access it if you're using local ISPs in New Zealand, and like that's sounds extreme, but like absent other options, like I see how they end up in that place.
I mean, I don't think it does sound extreme at this point, right? Like there are things that this is not just true of the internet, right? There are tons of things that it is generally accepted that people need to be kept out of people's hands for a variety of reasons, right? There's like the example you were talking about earlier with like a true archive, right? The structure of a true archive is such that things are kept away from people, both because they are vulnerable to decay over time, but also because to touch them puts you at risk. And like, honestly, I think that's fine. Like if we're talking about removing like actively malicious work, I don't, at that point, I stopped giving a shit about free speech as a principle.
Well, that's the thing. I fundamentally don't really put much stock in slippery slope arguments at this point, because it's always like, look, there is a point where the slope is slippery, I am sure, but this right here is a flat fucking plateau. Like this is just there's no like, oh man, but what if there's like something that's like adjacent to cute but not as bad? Like how do we it's like we can just identify this extreme case and just be like, fuck it. Like standard rules of discourse do not apply. And that doesn't put other speech rights at risk. Like this is not, I guess in some ways this is like the speech equivalent of modern firearms in some ways too, where it's like the level of widely disseminated and really specifically indexed and targeted material like this is simply not conceivable to principles of free speech that are formed around the idea of people being allowed to like write and publish what they want in like media outlets, or creating like structures of journalism or works of art. This isn't comprehended by that, and is such a perverse and extreme expression of something you might call speech that like it just doesn't pose the sort of like, that's what probably I found so funny about Cloudflare's when they posted their blog behind this reasoning, they said difficult cases make bad law. And I'm like, this isn't a difficult case. Like, I understand, like, for libertarian assholes, I'm sure this is very difficult. But for normal people, this is easy. And it was easy years ago. And the only reason it's not easy for you now is, like, I am sure somewhere there's a question of, like, at what point are we liable for stuff that's going to happen? Or at least if stuff continues to happen on this trajectory, at what point will there be a backlash against our other lines of business? Yeah,
when you start losing enterprise client, because the next step would be who's using Cloudflare. Do you want to be associated with someone? I mean, that was where this was going. That's where this was going to get pointed next. And so they must have crunched the numbers and just and figured it was just worth cutting bait and not having the negative PR continue. But I had to enjoy the last couple of days. Like, what new thing will Glenn Greenwald have to defend? And he was out here saying Kiwi Farms should still be online. Just delightful. What a complete piece of shit.
Free speech also doesn't protects you from the government censoring your speech, or not from fucking companies, right? Like, if you go all the way to like the fact that this is a private company that can kind of do whatever the fuck they want, it's only about PR, right? Which is why this like form of kind of directed campaign ended up working, is because it made them look bad enough. But like, there was actually probably not really that big of a legal like protection at all. Like that always seems tenuous, right?
But this type of philosophy is always like, also,
Sure.
by the way, like, even my middleman company, I don't want making these sorts of judgments about what are we helping perpetuate in the world, even though, again, like, these are judgments that occasionally you might have to add. And this was not a hard one. And then this is the thing that, like, you get no credit for this, having let it get to this point. I would find it very hard to believe at this point that Cloudflare does not have a fairly intimate connection with the people who run Kiwi Farms, just because of how often the shit is coming up.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, like, for them to have gone to this, like they were facing a fucking firing squad, like, I am so skeptical of this strain of, like, libertarian thought, because it's so weird how it always just sort of bounces onto the side of, like, outright fascist terrorists. It's just weird how it always comes out where it's like, I don't want to muzzle people just saying what they think. Like, this particular person should be hounded to death. These are not hard cases, but this strain of thought always seeks to blur that line, because that's the only way you can defend it. The only way you can defend letting this stuff, like, propagate online is by tying it to ideas and freedoms that people do care about, and somehow making people think that, like, this is an apples to apples thing, and we're just talking about, like, varieties of apple, and not that, like, it's like apples and cyanide capsules.
Well, and this is the first instance in which, like, there's a certain level of you're familiar with the internet and you've at least heard of Kiwi Farms, but it had never truly gone mainstream, right? Like, the closest it did was, during the Gamergate era, and Kiwi Farms has sort of just been, frankly, an institution. It is just that is just one of the parts of the internet, the ugly parts of the internet. It just exists. And what was different here was that, well, suddenly CNN's writing something, or you have reporters like Taylor Lorenz were very cued into the internet, like making sure the Washington Post is writing about it. And like, once you reach that level and you're writing out plainly what Kiwi Farms does, it's like, it's a website where they host people's personal information in the hopes of harassing their friends and family. And you just tell that to a normal person that, uses the internet to access Facebook. Like, everyone's like, thumbs down. Like, yeah, I guess that probably shouldn't exist. And it's like, once they hit that threshold where normal people are talking about it, that's the moment where Cloudflare lost, because there's just no like, before they were talking to the internet, like, poison pilled people who, like, but once you're talking to normal people and trying to explain why you're defending, that's why 8chan was gone. That's why Daily Stormware was gone. Because once you explain it to normal people, you cannot do it with a straight face. You cannot hide behind the thin libertarian ideological arguments. And that's what happened here. And then it just all falls apart once you have to explain to a New York Times reporter, why you're okay with a website specifically targeting people in the hopes that they'll kill themselves. It's just not going to hold up.
Yeah, I wish everyone involved with Kiwi Farms nothing but the absolute worst. I think if there's one sort of regret, is like, there will never be the sort of justice that actually is deserved for, like, the existence of that site, which is, people like Joshua Moon actually being made to answer.
Yeah, we're not going to get like the January 6th, like, they're showing up in court and they're doing the tearful apologies. But the one thing I'll say, the thing I do take solace in, is that the kind of person that ends up in a place like that, their whole identity is tied up in places like that. Their entire life, they have been forced to exist in a place like that because they have nothing else. And you take that away from them, and that's devastating in a different way. And that's not the same as seeing Joshua Moon put behind bars.
Yeah,
but it ain't nothing.
No, I mean it's satisfying to watch them like rattle the cage as this is closed around them. But hopefully it stays locked up and Kiwi Farms stays in internet hell forever. But we'll keep our fingers crossed for that.
Let's
take a break, recalibrate, and come back, talk about some games, and hit some emails. Back after this. And we're back. Finally getting to talk about some games here. So, Ren, you've been playing Splatoon 3.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't you fill me in?
So, Splatoon 3 is feels like an update to Splatoon 2, which is mostly fine because Splatoon 2 was pretty exceptional. It has mostly been like a lot of quality of life improvements and like a pretty large single player campaign that is, I think, pretty solid. It's a lot more creative than Splatoon has been before with its like single player offerings, but I mean the game feels like really good.
Splatoon 2 had a pretty terrific campaign. I think Splatoon 1 was like pretty light, but Splatoon 2 was there was secretly a reason to play this game if you didn't think you were going to. Maybe not worth full price. And of course, the problem is Nintendo games never go on sale. But but secretly, these games started having some pretty robust and interesting single player modes, which I'm encouraged to hear about the third one as well.
Yeah, there was the expansion at the end of Splatoon 2. They did the like Octoling expansion and added in a bunch of like extra single player content and a couple of like extra weapons. But Splatoon 3 builds on that because I don't know. Do y'all know the narrative premise of Splatoon 3? Can I deliver this on you?
Can I just pitch the last I remember of it,
yes,
and then you can correct me if I'm wrong? Is that the running theory is, or maybe this is explicit. It could go either way. But that this is a post-apocalypse story after humanity.
Yes,
and the squidlings are,
yes.
If not, I don't know if like they overtook us, but they are what is beyond.
Yes.
The organism that takes over the afterwards.
Yes. There are lore entries. There are lore entries in Splatoon where
what
people
took us
talk
down?
about the climate apocalypse. It's the climate apocalypse, baby.
Oh, right, because the Splatoon 3 trailer was like big desert.
Big desert.
People were wondering if maybe it was going to have like an open world element to its single player.
Now it's weird. Now here's the key though.
Yes.
The main threat in Splatoon 3
Us?
is furry tentacles.
Oh. Okay.
It's clumps of fur, balls of fur, furry goo.
That kind of furry.
How do you have furry goo, you may wonder? Oh, they found a way. Let me tell you, that 3D model does feel furry and gooey at the same time. It is troubling to kind of behold. It's like a step up from lichen, but started to like coat all of the like fish creatures. So you are seeing like kind of gooey furry fish walking around in the single player campaign, which is one of the more challenging images I've been confronted with as of late. I did not go into Splatoon expecting to be affronted by eldritch horror.
Fun.
But yeah, I mean, it's good. I mean, Splatoon remains the thing that it is, which is like a really tremendous multiplayer shooter that has for a Nintendo game, a surprisingly terrific competitive foundation. As someone who's been watching a lot of esports recently for like watching like Pro Valorant, I think that Splatoon is actually a tremendously well-designed esport. Both as like a viewer sport, but also like on a like gameplay level. And so if I have a hope for Nintendo, it's that they actually encourage those aspects of the game and its community, like post-release, because they've done a couple of tournaments, but they haven't like really leaned into it before.
Well, what's been? Oh, go ahead, Rob.
Well, not to always do the like, but the Switch is so ancient. My frames, my performance, but I am kind of curious. Given how smooth a lot of other shooters can be at this point, like how good feeling can be to play them, I'm curious. Like, does Splatoon 3 still feel like it's aimed perfectly at that hardware, or is it's not straining too much?
Not even a little bit. It is. I think the Nintendo Switch at its peak, because Splatoon 2 was stressing the Switch a little bit, I think.
Yeah.
I think that they have, in the time since its release, Nintendo has gotten a better grasp of how to pull everything out of that hardware, which is why Splatoon 3 barely looks better than Splatoon 2. It's all like very minor, like quality of life, like visual fidelity increases, like the ink is shinier and a little bit more reflective. But like it comes together to feel a lot more polished. But no, it like runs tremendously. I've not had any problems with how the game runs. Really smooth. And also, like, I think that the benefit Splatoon has in this case is that it is, from a competitive perspective, from like a gameplay perspective, it is designed with the fallibility of the Switch in mind. There are very few weapons in that game that are going to be dependent on a perfect flick. That like a frame perfect flick like something you would have in Valorant, right? And I think that is like a very big benefit for the series, like long-term potential, and also like its ability to like get people to try it.
Well, one of the things that I think works to Splatoon's advantage, and as someone that doesn't watch a lot of esports and thus finds a lot of it very unreadable or inscrutable because I'm not familiar with the like the specific language that's occurring, the verbs that I'm supposed to be watching about what I'm supposed to be impressed by. Part of what makes Splatoon work, I think, not only is it impressive because it has enough depth that it can capture people who are may on the surface wonder like, Nintendo made, a shooter, like, so of course it's, it's probably pretty simple, meant to appeal to kids, and it does, but also like you can just watch a Splatoon match, and because it's a game, like depending on the mode, like built around watching like, well, who's got more ink, right? Mm-hmm. Like, and it's more complicated than that, but like it's literal that like the main verb of like shooting ink, more ink of one team presenting dominance allows you as a viewer to very quickly grasp what is happening here, who's winning, who's losing, what's the tug and pull of the match. And I've always found that really arresting about Splatoon as a franchise is how much its literal visual design is keyed into its gameplay design. Yeah,
it's really cool to see. And I think that like the core of a thing that I've been thinking about recently as I've been like getting more into like Valorant and even like fighting games, the key to pretty much every competitive video game is who is controlling what space and how space is controlled. And usually that isn't visualized to an audience if you don't have like a perfect understanding of every character's ability.
Especially in a shooter, right? Where you're watching a singular first person perspective or even bouncing between them. Like part of what makes a fighting game like really effective is that you have mostly the whole field.
Exactly.
Like you can at least see all the players. You can see a health bar. The Splatoon, granted, it's helpful that it's third person, but it has all these other really smart aids that make its visual language easy to read,
right?
Even if you're not like really deep into that world,
right? You can see what angles are being covered because there is ink on them. You know who has control over what territory because it's like, oh, cool. If they had access to this area, it would not be covered in yellow ink, and it makes it like extremely readable and also like a lot easier to learn. I think that is the other like real benefit of like Splatoon as like a piece of game design is that it is way easier to learn what you are doing wrong and how to control space in Splatoon than it is in something like Valorant, because like again everything is literalized in front of you and it just makes it like way more approachable.
I know one of the things that this is true in Splatoon, much more true in Splatoon 2 when Nintendo more firmly embraced it. But the fashion element of Splatoon is a big deal, right? Like Nintendo sort of picked up on the fact that people, they want their swag. Like the like central hub area of Splatoon 2 is basically like going to a bunch of different stores and buying a bunch of cool different gear that you can like, kit yourself out with and then go out there. I'm curious what parts of Splatoon 3 have added to that. Is it sort of the same?
So I think that Splatoon has always leaned really, really hard into like hype beast fashion aesthetics,
yes,
which are not my favorite thing. I like streetwear a lot, but the specific kind of streetwear that Splatoon has kind of tied itself to, like the very like brand dominated, like fucking big shirt, little shoes. Sorry, big shirt, big shoes, little pants. Style of streetwear has like been like the core of the series for a really long time. And a thing that I am relatively excited about, another thing that I want to know here, is that I haven't actually gotten to see much of the fashion because the way that Nintendo runs their things can be a little bit difficult to interact with sometimes. And so the fashion that was on rotation when I was playing in preview and in like the review era was not extensive. They were not cycling it, I think, at the pace that they cycle
so is that how that, I forget, it's been a while since I played Splatoon 2, so it's like basically like the shops are refreshing from a larger pool, and basically part of the reason to log in every day is to see what what is it, Zur and Destiny, but instead it's like what are the Splatoon shops selling today?
Yeah, exactly. Or you can use the phone app, which is a thing I did when I played Splatoon 2, because there's sometimes exclusive things you can get on the phone app. Is that a
Splatoon app or the Nintendo Online?
It is the Nintendo Online app in which there is a Splatoon section, because the Nintendo Online app is a weird hydra.
Well, right, because that's how they want you to do voice chat, right? Like in theory, is through.
Well, they did. Mess. Do they still?
Yes,
I don't remember.
I believe so.
Gross.
I believe so.
I mean, I don't think that's how most normal people do it, but I that might have been that's my last memory of where that part of Nintendo's online infrastructure, confusing infrastructure, left off.
And this is probably because it's a different company, but Pokemon Unite, which is developed by Timmy, has in-game voice chat, so it's like physically hardware possible on the Switch. So it was weird that they decided.
Weird? I'm not sure if that's the word I use, but
it was Nintendo that they decided.
It is weird, but I don't know that it's weird that Nintendo did it.
Right.
This is the friend code company, so
yeah.
But yeah, my hope is that, because the thing that I really want is like more alt fashion in the game, because again, it's very like rooted in this hypebeast aesthetic. And as a devoted little alt girl, I do want like my big sweaters. I have to see more big sweaters. Give me
just in time for fall season, right? Like, come on, Splatoon, it's not the summer.
I need something to approximate the extremely toxic Evangelion sweater I spend most of my days wearing. So people know that I am heinous.
Who are the people this time that aren't?
The idols?
Yeah. Doesn't one of them have a sweater type deal?
Yes, she does. I wish that her clothes were available in game, because her fit is extremely cute. Let me show y'all these three.
But that could also signal that they might be moving towards more of that stuff as well. Like
they
adding
leaned
some
in.
Of that stuff.
They leaned into the 15 head aesthetic from Splatoon 2. They decided to quadruple down.
I love this manta ray just standing.
So good.
I believe his name is Big Boy. No, it's Big Man. It's not Big Boy, it's Big Man. Mm-hmm. It's Shiver, Big Man, and Fry are each of their names.
Wonderful.
Shiver and Big Man are very Renata core to me. Everybody needs a big man in their life, is kind of my take. And if you don't have a big man, maybe you are the big man. Look inside yourself.
One of the things that I've always loved about Splatoon is, and I would log in and check this out even when I wasn't interested in playing the game, is just the community hub and the images and the drawings that people share. All I can think of right now, this is, I don't know how on the scale of horrible you think, but like the Queen just died. And all I can think of is
it's going to be so good tomorrow.
The shit posting that the Splatoon community is going to be doing. If you're unfamiliar with this, Splatoon is the closest thing that Nintendo has to extending the Miiverse. And the Miiverse was a social network they made for the Wii U that was wholly unique, so interesting. I remain so frustrated that they didn't extend it to the Switch in any meaningful way, because there were a lot of cool ideas and incorporated people doing drawings, and Splatoon essentially takes some of that and is that still here?
Yes.
Like,
God, yes.
So people are going to be dunking on the Queen, and Nintendo moderators are going to be flying wild when this podcast goes live at around the same time the Splatoon is available for the people.
Patrick, they have billboards floating in the sky. You can go to a specific part of the hub, and there are just fucking floating billboards that take up a tremendous amount of space that are just going to have the worst shit you can imagine. I am so excited.
The tradition continues.
Within 3 days, I think within 24 hours, I'm going to see at least 5 Twitter posts that are someone uploading their art that says like, I'm a little gay weirdo. And then a picture of Big Man. And that is going to immediately dominate Splatoon 3, and I'm so excited. Good luck.
It's a huge
moderators.
part of the extension. Like after I had finished like Splatoon 2's campaign, I don't know if I finished it, but I got like a decent like that. Those became my interactions with Splatoon. Much like my interactions with the Wii U that I rarely turned on was seeing Miiverse posts and people finding either sharing something they did in Splatoon or something darkly humorous that they found in Splatoon. I mean, Splatoon. Some of my favorite stuff in the Miiverse was, people were just, it was mostly shit posting and like, my parents just got divorced, I'm sad. And then like seeing how long that would stay up before a Nintendo moderator would do something about it. And it was just a delight.
And then you get the real strength, which is the person shit posting about the fact that their parents are divorced and they're sad. And that's where the Miiverse really coalesces into like a concrete form. I don't know. I think Splatoon whips. I think is like a really cool franchise, and I'm really excited to see it get another shot.
Is the single player obviously this is like a more me-centric question, but like, is the single player meaningfully different? Is it just sort of like a campaign sort of thing?
So yes and no. They have decided to be a lot more varied and experimental with how they understand what a level is. And what the objectives of a level are. Because like in Splatoon 2, the objective is pretty consistently just get to the end of it and get the little guy or fight a boss. In Splatoon 3, they have decided to make every level a weird game show challenge. And so you can take it on with a handful of different weapons, all of which require you to play slightly differently and take on like odd objectives. One of the things that I've seen is like one of them is just asking you to jump over rings until you jump over enough rings to, and they're like, you did the game show. Good job. Here are your points. And so they've gotten, at the very least, a lot more experimental and like expressive with what they are asking you to do. And like the level design on those has always been excellent. I think Splatoon's like level design has always been great. And so seeing it used to different and more interesting ends has actually been really nice. And also like the new weapons, like they have made the weapons feel distinct from one another and interact with like level designs in more particular ways, which I, again, appreciate.
Like what?
So like every level only has 4 weapons you can use on it, which they pick out beforehand.
Mm-hmm.
And so there are ways in which you can pick something up and be like, oh, cool. This group of enemies here I have to approach, or like this like bit of terrain here I have to approach in a totally different way because I am using the umbrella. And I could like, this is totally trivial with any weapons that are not given to me right now. And I have to like specifically learn the quirks of the thing that I am using in this moment. In a way that I think that Splatoon 2 gave you a lot of freedom as to like what you wanted to use in any given level after you like get the weapons. And so it's good to see them pushing a little bit harder and like being more intentional about what you can and can't do.
And you mentioned it was like mostly iterative. Is there like a big new game mode? I've not been specifically following like the Splatoon directs or anything, or is it mostly just new levels, new weapons?
That is like the major disappointment, is that there's nothing on the tier of Salmon Run, because Salmon Run was the big addition in Splatoon 2, which is the game's horde mode. Splatoon 3 does not add anything on that scale. It just has so many quality of life improvements that it's kind of astounding. Nintendo has a mostly reasonable lobby system, actually, which is hard to say.
Congratulations. Yeah. But I mean, that's the, to your point of Splatoon, a game that probably would be bigger if it was like Nintendo's like approach to online competition was, I don't know, they're just more attentive and interested in it. Like the fact that Splatoon 3 has a better lobby system, has quality of life improvements, like in theory, hopefully that is helping it approach more of a Smash Brothers situation where it can sort of break free of just being like a popular Nintendo game, but also have like a longer lasting impact. And stuff like that is, critical to sort of getting the game in a place where it can even, the community can pick like, hey, actually like Splatoon 3 is our game, like a Melee or something like that.
Yeah. I think that Splatoon kind of was a forerunner for the era of the weird shooter that we are now in. Like, I think that like Rollerdrome is not. I think that Rollerdrome and the genre that emerges around it and that is a part of gets a big boost when Splatoon 1 comes out, and it does really well. Mm-hmm. And I hope that like the continued success of that series makes people just do more interesting things. If you're gonna make a shooter, like make it interesting. Make it fun.
Like you still shoot guns. I mean, that's always, in the same way that, Nintendo's approach to the open world. If you break that down into a feature set, it doesn't sound all that different than what you're doing in an Assassin's Creed game or whatever. But there's something about Nintendo's design sensibilities that it's always exciting when they choose to enter a genre that you would go, really? Like, this doesn't seem like this fits your set, but what they bring to it is always, or usually something really interesting, because I think that was the knock on them in like the GameCube era, roughly around there, where violent realistic shooters were becoming the most popular genre, and it's like, well, Nintendo's fucked. Like, look at Wind Waker, what they can't keep pace with this, and they found, they went through their ups and downs, but when they eventually turned their attention to a genre that would not seem to be compatible with what even their action games largely don't involve guns. They end up producing something tremendously interesting.
It's expressive. Like that is the core thing, is that understands that like mechanics are tools for expression as opposed to ends in and of themselves. And like that is why I generally like it when Nintendo does weird stuff.
Agreed.
So I guess in the vein of things that are trying to be weird but maybe aren't weird enough. So I'm playing 2 Point Campus, which is like kind of a for-profit education version of 2 Point Hospital, which is sort of, as Kyle was mentioning, I think as we were sort of wrapping up the session yesterday, I'm not sure this was on air, but we were sort of talking after the show that like 2 Point Hospital is a series that kind of explicitly is trying to sort of be the inheritor of the theme hospital, mantle.
Yeah.
Which was
I believe there was some
mid to late 90s satire.
Yeah, late 90s. It was. I think there was some crossover in devs too, right? Like there were some Expo people on that team.
I can't remember if it was like that sort of direct lineage or not. Certainly, it was positioned that way.
Yeah,
as like if you liked Theme Hospital, this is it. And I liked 2 Point Hospital. It was fun. I think maybe the most crucial thing is the interface for this series is really, really good. Very legible, very snappy. The humor is very, what is the way to put it? Like, it is like the satire is like the satire could not cut butter, right? Is kind of how it is. Like it's all we're all having a good time. This is very much like at most like a late night monologue in terms of edginess for how much it's going to push its points. So 2 Point Hospital's very much about like, boy, pretty wacky how these people with all these conditions have to pay us all this money. And we're in a sort of milk them for as much as possible. Yeah, exactly. And like, so 2 Point Campus is taking that same approach to like higher ed. And so you like, to give you an idea of the humor at least you're gonna be dealing with, and there are points where it's charming, but like this is kind of as pointed as it gets in places. Like there's little, as in a lot of your more lighthearted management games. There's a voiceover / like radio like broadcast in the background, and at you hear ads for your university, and it says education provides you with a bright future, and then clouds it with debt. Hold for laughter.
It's less. The healthcare one, I feel like that falls flatter than the education one. I'm not trying to minimize student debt, but there's something about like people actively dying in order to, like that seems so much more crushing than the financial one. But I who knows how far, I don't know how far they take that once you get that initial pitch.
So,
well, I think. Oh yeah, please, Connor.
I just wanted really quickly to confirm that the producer, lead artist, and composer of Theme Hospital are the ones that kind of went on to make 2 Point Studio to make the 2 Point. What was it? 2 Point Hospital.
2 Point Hospital and 2 Point Campus. Yeah. Ryan, you had something.
Yeah, I was gonna like ask if. Do you think, as someone who played both, do you feel like the like Patrick was like, the darkness of making jokes about healthcare makes it a lot more, like, makes it land flatter? Does it make it land flatter, or does it actually help things out with the contrast?
No, I think it lands about the same way, honestly, for me, and just in terms of how the comedy is hitting. Like, it's we all been there, buddy. It's fine, and I guess crucially, if the comedy's probably already right up to the line where if it were more pointed and obtrusive in the game, you would just be starting to get increasingly annoyed by it. And instead, it kind of has to occupy this space. It's almost like the punchlines are landing like music beats, where you'll have tunes playing in the background, then you'll hear a little joke, a little like fake jingle for your college, and then the game goes on. You have to be able to tune that out. But then occasionally, the stuff that will sort of catch you is various like DJs appear on the radio, and like they will go on little riffs, and very occasionally you'll sort of start to realize like, oh, this is actually kind of a good, weird little riff this dude is on. I think the bigger thing that is in play for me is the nature of the management game you're playing. So 2 Point Hospital was very much a game fundamentally about pathing. 2 Point Hospital is about managing to make it fast, efficient, profitable, and successful from the moment a patient walks into intake to sort of have them just barreling like a rifle shot through the various specialists and wards that they need to go through to get their to get treated. Which, by the way, already means the 2 Point Hospital satire can't help but be comparatively utopian. That's the other funny part of this is like, well, you better pay up. I would happily pay for the kind of healthcare you get. Okay, well, you're coming with comedy diseases like lightheadedness, and they got big light bulbs for heads. But like the utopian part of it is like 2 Point Hospital is you go to the hospital and they just like shuttle you through
fix
from specialists.
Your whole shit up.
Yeah, like all the tests are done immediately. The diagnosis has got to be like fast and accurate, and then you got to get your treatment because that's what you're paying the money for. And like, this is where the metaphor breaks down, because the 2 Point Hospital version of America is like 5 different tiny like medical strip mall campuses separated by like 3 miles of gridlock and parking lots. And then each one has a different fucked up relationship with your insurance. Like it's kind of like beyond satire. So 2 Point Hospital is like you're building this beautifully like vertically integrated hospital network. And it's like, boy, it's a pretty messy that this is all for profit, huh? And I'm like, oh man, I wish I lived in this world. These people don't have it. This person paid me $10,000, but you know what? They got all that medical care.
What they don't show during the game is the amount of people that get apparently thrown down chutes because their credit defaulted.
Right, which is the opening of Theme Hospital. The even more pointed, gag there. But talking about the pathing thing, so that's 2 Point Hospital.
Right.
2 Point Campus, because the different sort of thing you are building, pathing feels much less important. It's much more a game about like almost adjacencies or efficiencies that exist in like the ready access characters have to facilities that they need, which is its own different challenge, but it is not quite as demanding or satisfying like building a ship in a bottle category as like designing a really good hospital layout in 2 Point Hospital. This is much more like, yeah, so I put the teacher's lounge here and there's a bunch of classrooms around it, and then you gotta have some bathrooms so they're not like having to path too far to the bathroom and like missing classes. But like that's not like, there's a much bigger error bar around that than there is around like somebody comes in intake and that patient will be dead in like 5 minutes unless they start getting the right diagnosis from like the jump.
That's also not. Oh, sorry, Kata.
I was just gonna ask: is there limitations? Like, so in Theme Hospital, the part of the thing was that once you hit a certain amount of profitability, you like move to the next level, and it would be a harder layout, right? Like there would be more like different buildings that you had to build out. And so the pathing would become more complicated because people are then moving not just within a single building, but moving out to other buildings and such. Is that a thing in this one, or how's the structure?
So it's kind of clever how they do this. With each you unlock different campuses, and you can just sort of stay on your campus, and it will continue throwing like more advanced challenges at you with that layout and on that campus, or you can just move on to the next one, which will like give you a different scenario. And then that one will sort of tier up. And so it's kind of interesting. I kind of really like the structure, honestly, of the game kind of encourages you to leave a bunch of half-finished scenarios and move on to the next thing where it's going to tutorialize some other set of features and buildings. But then like later you can come back and be like, well, now with some of the stuff I've unlocked and some of the stuff I've come to understand from these other like schools I took over, now this next like leg of the journey of this like starting campus is going to be like really easy or interesting. So that's kind of how they handle that progression.
So the question that I'm kind of hitting is, does the game mechanically actually feel like it's about a school? Because like the things that you're describing with pathing and adjacency those are the things that cause inefficiencies in something like a hospital, right? And I think that the thing I'm coming up against as you're describing this is like, that's not what causes problems in schools, like efficiency-wise. And so does the game feel like it's at all thinking about that fact? Or like what actually causes inefficiency in educational institutions?
So there's a couple things. One is, I think this game has a very heavy UK perspective in terms of how these things work. And so like, a bit like with Hospital, but it feels even more pointed here. It's just not as in tune with how like what American campus life is like, as opposed to like UK in some ways. But I think so. The way this plays out in terms of, again, you kind of can't help but end up in the process of satirizing, ending up with something that's accidentally kind of utopian. One of the things that you're really measured on is how well students are learning. Like, are students actually being properly educated in the thing that your university is, in the courses your university is offering? Right. And the way you make sure that that happens is, so like, one, how good are the teachers in the classroom? How many individual learning facilities are in the big laboratory or workshop area that's associated with a different specialty course? But then how easy is it for the students to go to the library and like hit the books in the library? And so that's kind of where the inefficiencies crop up, is like, if the library is understaffed or it's too far away, students will not use it. And so they will underperform. So it's kind of like basically making it so that all the necessary educational resources are like easy for students to like utilize in education mode. But then, and I think maybe this is where it starts to dial in a little more on like some of the weird incentives around American campus life. Students also want to have fairly posh living conditions on campus. And so you're kind of encouraged to run really lavish and inefficient like money sinks in terms of dorms and like student unions and things like that, in part because like that makes the student body happier, but it does mean that like housing begins to consume a bigger and bigger part of your budget, because like there's a certain point where you just cannot cram enough creature comforts into a dorm room unless you like size it up. Right. And so that's kind of the tension that you're sort of wrestling with here, is that the marketability of your university sort of depends on the ability to like throw a lot of shiny objects in front of prospective students, and keep the student body happy. But then the outcomes for university depends on having a lot of like seamlessly integrated resources for the students to have access to and use. And so that's kind of the tension. It's not a terrible rendering. You know, again, the thing that's the missing element in a lot of these things is, the thing that this game isn't going to have is a massive, like, you're not required to hire more and more administrators who just like consume colossal sections of budget, right? Which is kind of the real issue, is like, why are university finances so fucked up? Well, it's because like universities grow admin staff, but they do not invest in teaching staff, and they do not invest in like educational facilities. Right. They kind of turn into a racket for like assistant deans and admins. You don't have that in this game. There is no like bureaucratic leeching that happens in the on the campus. So that's kind of what's missing. But mostly what you're doing is trying to like strike this balance between having efficient, ready access to resources, and then also making it so that your campus is the most like play hard, for whatever students are into environment it can be.
Are you making decisions about what fields are getting prioritized at all? Or is it just each campus has its priority already and you are not making that decision and not having to balance the difficulties between, like, for example, funding a like tremendous liberal arts department versus like a mediocre engineering department?
So this is, I'm starting to get to the point where the game is turning into that a little bit more, which is, usually at the start, a college has like a thing it's focusing on. You're learning about the things that go with that type of education. But then as you're trying to expand out and like grow the student body, you're highly incentivized to start offering more courses. Weirdly enough, it's kind of, well, I guess you can choose to make it have more rhyme or reason. But the thing is, like, what you're not going to have is a lot of complementary courses that you can offer where it makes sense, like, oh yeah, this is a humanities school, and so we're getting a lot of humanities departments stood up in here. Like, this is all very like, the model of university education here is wacky vocational school. So it is like our VR classroom that teaches the kids how to use VR and like build things in VR. We need to like stand that program up and invest in a VR lab and all that stuff. But then if we want to offer another course next year, we have a choice between, cooking, like a culinary school, or it can be like building robots. And you experience a bit of the tension in terms of, almost inevitably, the newer department will just not have the expertise that the senior department does. And so like in its early stages, it will be a bit of like a weak point for you. And so you do wrestle with a bit of the tension between like maximizing excellence in one area and wanting to have the most diverse student, like honestly, I mean, the incentive it seems to give you for bringing these folks in is it's profitable to have a lot of mediocre departments. It's you can make a lot of money by offering more classes, and so that's kind of the tension you're navigating. Is like, after a certain point, you could increase the capacity and the worth of like a department by investing more in it, but might be faster and easier just to say we're going to stand up a new department and grow the student body that way. So like it's cute, it's fun. As I said, like it's the thing they do really well in the series is it's just kind of nice to play with the big snappy tools and lay out the little, the facilities you're building and creating like comfortable little spaces for people to work with, and different things for the little creatures to engage with. That's all good. It's a very fun, chill management game. Like with 2 Point Hospital, though, it's like I'm right there on the border of like it might just be so chill that I'm like not feeling much friction that's interesting for me to overcome. If I get into trouble, I just sort of accelerate time and watch the money roll in, and then I can buy whatever is the equipment that I need to sort of get out of trouble. But I assume and I hope it gets it's harder as you go along. But several scenarios into this, it still feels like it's so focused on being a chill and frictionless good time that it's not necessarily setting like any sort of interesting puzzles before you.
I guess the final question I have is like, you talked about the satire falling a little bit flat, and this might not be what this game is about, right? You can tell me if that's the case. Does it feel like these games believe anything about the way institutions are run beyond like very simple satire?
That's a good. Like I think they do believe things, but I would not say they're extremely thoughtful about it. Is though like you don't get a sense of there being an argument to be made. It's a bit like, honestly, it's a bit like talking to fairly non-political friends who fundamentally have like decent beliefs and a decent like intuitive sense for like how the world should be, but really not given a ton of thought to like how it could be like that or what are the forces stopping it from being like that. And so like the level of analysis that you get here is very much informed by like, wow, like universities are too expensive, and boy, maybe they wouldn't be so expensive. They weren't spending all this money on marketing themselves to students and sort of presenting themselves as a young adult playground rather than a place of higher learning. That's kind of as far as the argument goes, that I can tell. There's little bits that like, I don't know, maybe this is becoming more of an internationalized thing, but there's bits where you have incentive. One thing you have incentive to do is like jam your campus full of snack machines. Because like one, it brings in revenue for you directly, is students running over to the vending machine and using that, but also like occasionally the 2 Point the 2 Point fake brand for like Cheetos and shit, cheesy gubbins. They will send like campus reps to be like, are you providing enough cheesy gubbins to your student body? And they will give you a bonus if you do, like a significant bonus in the early part of the game. And like, if you're familiar with public high schools and how those like vending machine contracts play out and what is made like readily accessible to students, like, that's not, I don't know how big a deal that is in college, but that is for sure a dynamic I recognize from high school, where it was like Pepsi and Frito-Lay were keenly interested in how students and what students were eating on campus.
Yep. Got it.
So I mean, look, I think I'm having a nice time with it, and I wasn't sure I would. That's the main thing. And I think my initial reaction was very much like, oh, it's a little too, humor's a little too groan worthy. It's a little too anodyne. I stick with it. I think it's rewarding enough as you see more systems come together and the demands being made on you to sort of prestige up your building. So that's kind of the progression you're doing is things cap out and you just need to get more goodies into the facility in order to prestige it higher and attract like a higher level of rating for your student, for your university, and higher, like more tuition. So that's kind of where it starts to get more interesting. Is as you begin just running into the physical limits of how much crap you can jam into the university. It is tied to a bit of a, not exploitative, but it has an in-game unlock system where as you complete missions, you get their special like super currency that is basically controlling the pace at which you unlock these kinds of special upgrades that you need. So that's kind of thing is you bring in tuition money that pays for 95% of what you need, but to unlock like special items, like decorative items, you need their special like space box. So that's the one thing sort of that's the hook that's drawing you along. And it's effective. Like I said, it's better than initially appears, and has not been a bad time. I have been very curious about, because I guess this is a heavy topic for today, but I do love monarchies in a time of revolution. I love
Being
me
one?
mad
Love
emperors. I love me decaying royal lines.
Father.
Did you see?
That'll make sense in a week. No.
What did I see?
Is it already out?
Did you see the tweet that Steam official Twitter deleted?
No, wait.
No.
Please feed me.
Hit me.
Here, I linked it. Why isn't it embedding? Whatever. They had tweeted just before the news broke, Steam, free weekend. Play Crusader Kings 3 free this weekend and save 20% when you buy the game.
Why would you delete that?
Fucking
incredible. Who's so nerveless?
I know.
You can't encourage people to play Crusader Kings on the weekend the queen has
They
died.
kill monarchs in that game. You heard about that?
I would say marketing departments, but Valve's structure doesn't. That's where a traditional company, Rob, would go like just take the scheduled tweet out today. But Valve, I don't know. That sounds like that's like just Jake Rodkin is the kind of person who would delete that because the structure there is so weird.
There's gonna be some all time like cringe branded posts for sure around this.
Oh,
But
Domino's is already weighed in.
I can't get over this clutch points thing.
Mhm.
If you've seen that, it's like I think this is basically a shit post that is meant to draw this kind of attention. So I kind of maybe it's not because they appear to have deleted it. Shit, I should have screen capped it. I should have screen capped it. Fuck.
Oh.
Clutch Points had Queen Elizabeth ascending to the gates of heaven with like a bunch of athletes in like a who the fuck is the shitty right wing artist like John McNaughton or whatever. Like a bunch of artists done in that style,
Right.
like grieving her as she ascends the stairway to heaven. And it's like Lewis Hamilton and like Tua Tagovailoa, like just their heads bowed solemnly as the Queen waves goodbye.
Oh, we got the radio one. We got the radio one. Yes.
Oh hell
Y'all
yeah!
remember
Perfect.
what was the other one? I forgot what the original one of these was, where they had to stop the fucking...
It was are you talking about the
They had to stop the broadcast of like this fucking EDM, and then like they announced the death of someone important, and then it hits, but when it comes back in, it cuts right to the drop of the song.
Incredible. Anyway, Patrick, obviously, it's difficult to talk about a game like Steelrising at a time like this in history, and yet I must know how you've been getting on with the French Revolutionary Automata.
Yes. I've played about 3 or 4 hours of Steelrising, the new game from Spiders, the developers most recently of Greedfall, and that was sort of a like colonialist Mass Effect RPG
Hell
sort
of a
of
first
thing.
act. Great.
Yeah.
And then I don't know if you guys have the best grip on this.
You and Austin played it, and so, Spiders, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Rob, so they have more experience with the studio than I do, but like just sort of perennially in a studio that's like just a couple steps away, like an interesting choice, an interesting game, but it's just not quite all the way there. And then you're curious about what they'll do next. I don't know if the pivot I was thinking was Greedfall and then a Souls-like, but that's my impression of Spiders from a distance, is a studio that everyone's like, like, that's all right. I mean, it's pretty flawed, but in interesting ways.
I was just going to use this analogy, which is that, like, Spiders games, they don't hide that necessarily deepest, darkest parts of the well behind the bar. But, like, it's there on the bar back, and you'll be like, hey, you got a Spiders game back. You know what? I could really go for that. Can you give me some of that Greedfall gin? I could, I know it's kind of funky, but I'm in the mood
though.
I could go for a Kentucky Gentleman.
That's kind of where they are at. I would say, like, a noticeable, like, step behind where their aspirations are pointed, but, like, far above, like, sort of the joke tier that some games wander into.
Right, or like, what some games are called, like, like Eurojank or something like that. Like they always seem like they're above that. They like exist in a different tier, almost like their games are frequently like that, like double A, single A, like, to use a lack of a better term, but like games that existed more in like the PS2, like the PS2 era was like a real hallmark of this, of like, like a game like a Psyops, where it's like, this is an interesting shooter. Yeah, it's not as polished or as big budgeted as some of the other stuff out there, but like, it's trying something different. And so I've always gotten the impression from Spiders that that's kind of the studio they are. I come here to report, I think Steelrising carries on the tradition of, interesting, more so than finally the studio put it all together. But yeah, Steelrising is, I didn't know the premise of this game. And I've been confusing it with a more anime focused one that comes out later this month, whose name that I can't.
I swear to God, I told you about the premise of this game on this podcast like 3 weeks ago.
Wait, what are you
No, it's not Lives of P. There's a different, maybe it's more of an action game. I don't know, but I've been confusing these games. And Steelrising opens with the reveal that, yes, during the French Revolution, things are burning, things are going poorly.
Well, one could say there's been not enough revolution, is the impression I get. That
sure,
the King Louis does what the real life version didn't have the will and crucially
or an army of robots
technology to do.
And so yes, like part of what is oppressing at the moment is apparently an army of killer robots, but fortunately, Marie Antoinette has a bodyguard, which is you. You're the good robot, or at least the ambivalent robot that can follow Marie Antoinette's orders to go out and figure how do we stop this thing? How do we get these robots out of here? And so then you just go out a window, and then time to start fighting some fucking robots.
Marie Antoinette, classic revolution liker.
It's bizarre. I'm sure it'd be even more bizarre for anyone else on this podcast who has a better sense of history than I do. But it's odd. It has like a very weird, striking setup that is just like, I don't know how we got here. It does feel like a bit of like if Lies of P is like someone spinning, the Pinocchio one. Like it's people just like making these Souls-like and just spinning a wheel. And I don't know how we ended up on French Revolution with robots, but nonetheless, we end up on French Revolution with robots, and it's a game that controls extremely awkwardly to start. It's weird because I just came off 110-ish hours of Elden Ring. I finished that this week, right? And so I am coming off playing.
So you've fallen off the top shelf.
Well, yeah. I mean, yes. Like I am playing. I like more mixed thoughts about Elden Ring, like holistically, but it is FromSoft from in all sorts of ways operating at the top of their game. And then the next day, I'm like, well, time to load up this review key for Steelrising and see how this goes. And here's what I'll say about it. Yes, it controls a little awkwardly. It does not feel as fluid. That is the case for like broadly most of the games that attempt to ape what From Software is doing in terms of combat. The one from a couple of weeks ago, Thymesia, is a game that one is specifically using Bloodborne as a jumping off point. and then trying to do its own spin on it. I think the combat there is interesting. I think one of the points I made there was, but the level design and the art direction like aren't very good. And it is a misreading of From Software's games to not understand that those things all work in concert with one another. The combat is key. The games don't work without the combat. But and so Steelrising is a game. So what's different about the combat here? So the difference in Steelrising is there is a much bigger emphasis on elemental sort of manipulation. There's a much bigger emphasis on items. It is the Elden Ring, really encapsulates this, but it's true of all the Souls games, in which one of the things they share in common with survival horror games is you get to the end and all those cool buffs and things you could have thrown at enemies you just didn't use because, well, couldn't use it here. Like, this may not be the run. It's how you end up at Resident Evil with 60 pieces of of grenade ammunition that you could have used to get yourself out of some tight quarters. Part of what Steelrising emphasizes pretty quickly is that in order to not just mitigate the difficulty, but to really take advantage of what's different here, is you are going to want to manipulate elemental weaknesses, and a lot of that involves throwing like fire grenades, or I have a gun that produces frost damage, and you'll see those literally filling up. So unlike the Souls games where like bleed buildup or frost buildup that can lead to like a really powerful attack if you get enough hits in, all those meters are hidden. You just have to hit hard enough, and then eventually it'll happen. Here, it's all forwarded. Like when I shoot an enemy with an ice bullet, I see that thing fill up, and then I know I have to knock it like 2 or 3 more times, and then it will get into a frozen state. And that is really, I think they're forwarding that because as opposed to elemental attacks in a Souls game being optional, like just a thing you can play with, here it's pretty core. I mean, you can do just like unbelievable crippling damage to, like, the first boss that I faced. I had saved all my bullets and then just kept firing them at the boss, and I would just lock them into a stun position over and over again. And this, big boss, powerful music, and a big red bar at the top of the screen. He can't move, and then I just whack him over and over again. You have grenades that will like stun them, so that you can do. The game has the equivalent of kind of like a visceral attack or like a really powerful critical hit, where you can do that on sneaking up on an enemy, or you can do it by stunning them. And stunning can happen where you get enough attacks in that you fill a meter and they get stunned, or you could just lob a grenade at them and you can stun them. And so these elemental things also apply to you. And so there are enemies that will shoot flames, and like you will light on fire, and then you need to dash in order to essentially, like, you don't actually stop, drop, and roll, but it's the game's equivalent of that.
If you're on fire, run as fast as you can and fan the flames out.
Yes, yes. There's another neat mechanic where in a lot of these games, your attacks are limited on stamina, and you can of course upgrade that so you can attack more often. And then when that's exhausted, you can't run, or you can't attack, or your attacks are limited to be like a light attack. So that happens here. You'll exhaust your stamina. But then what happens, you can either wait for that to fill back up, or the alternative is there's a white, like the green meter goes down, and then a white meter appears. And that white meter starts going down. And if you hit the Y button on a controller, and you can get that stamina bar back, but you'll have imbued yourself with frost damage. And so let's say you're facing an enemy that can hit you with frost damage. You can lock yourself in so you can get another attack in really quick, but you may also open yourself up.
Because the idea is your stamina
frozen.
is overheating, right?
Yes,
that's the thing,
correct.
where it's like it has to. You need time to vent if you're going to air cool, or you can do that liquid nitrogen cooling.
Exactly.
And really hot rod that rig.
Yes, and you'll actually see that reflected in the animations of the character, and like I think the aesthetic of the different like robotic enemies and your character are like pretty sick. Like where it falls down is like the environmental stuff is just really bland.
I kind of felt like,
when
you're talking about that spin of the wheel, I'm like, I feel like the reason they get there is like robots, and then like late 18th century French revolutionary fashion. What an incredible combo. And I'm like, it is a pretty incredible combo.
It's a really good
it's like
combo.
that robot in Akake just like killed a guy. okay, here we go.
Yeah, and I'm like still pretty early on, so I haven't gotten a ton of equipment, but the equipment is extremely fashionable. And you can definitely see yourself like, look, I just want my sick ass robot to have this sick ass fit instead of, I don't know, +5 frost defense or whatever. And so because it's a setting that is just not, I don't know, I haven't played a game that's been in a setting like this since Assassin's Creed did it, right? Which was Assassin's Creed Unity?
Yeah.
Unite? Is that what you called it?
Unite.
So that part works. Like the outfits are pretty cool. But I think similar to Thymesia, I started out with a really poor impression of Steelrising, where I think that was coming off a high of Elden Ring and then playing something that feels derivative, not having a good sense of its identity, and then just aesthetically, it is just such a step backwards, not just on a budget level, but just in a artistic directional level. It's like the Souls games from Software really understands environmental design and using that as part of not just storytelling, but also how they lay out combat scenarios. And I feel like that's frequently lost in a lot of these games that take influence from them. But as I got further on, I'm not going to make any, like, story is, like, completely absent. Like, nothing is occurred.
Wait, hold on. So this is my question, because, like,
Yeah.
where I played the demo that was released, like, a month or so ago, and I got through the same part where I got through the Gardens of Versailles, and then you get to the city.
Yep.
And I was kind of curious, like, is it going to go in more of a Greedfall direction, where it's like, talk to Monsieur Robespierre. He is the only one who can help us. And like you're playing factions, or is it more like
nothing
gonna
yet.
be straight the dark, like a Souls game where it's like, here's a new quest. Go kill your way to the end of this level.
Yeah, that seems to be what it is so far, which, given the studio's previous RPG leanings, is a little disappointing, because I think what could have been really interesting was some sort of mashup between the two of those, right? Where, like, the game does have a compass, so you do have main missions and submissions, and it will vaguely mark where you're supposed to go for those. And so it is a game that is a little more explicit about main paths and side paths and investigating things that are optional relative to how From Software traditionally handles that, which is, I don't know, go look up a guide. You chuckle fuck. You're not going to figure this out playing the game. But I wish it had leaned harder in that direction. Or at least I'm hoping that if I play a couple more hours, there's a little bit more of that, because as it stands, it is like a big opening cutscene, and then, I don't know, do you want to read some scraps of paper on the ground? And then, like, the NPCs are similar to Bloodborne, which is like people locked up in their houses and like, I need some water. Okay, I found some water on the ground. Here's a fragmentation grenade. Thank you. So that part of it is a little disappointing.
I have a question.
Yes.
Does this game have... okay, the parry liker is about to log on. Does this game have anything that feels even remotely as good as a Souls game parry? Like as a FromSoft parry, whether it be Bloodborne or a good parry in one of the Dark Souls games. Like, do you have that, like, high risk, high reward combat option that feels snappy?
No. I mean, like, this is kind of the rub with any of these, or most of these, like, the Soul spinoffs, is that it's going to be, how interested are you in the variation that it's doing? Can you tolerate what's interesting and different about it, while also realizing it's never going to have the same crunchy, satisfying feel that FromSoft has in their game. So here, parry is a bit like Elden Ring, in which it's optional. So there are some enemies that, some weapons that have a parry, some weapons that have a different special attack. So parry is a special as opposed to built into the, like, core combat mechanics. And I do have a parry. I have found the parry window to be wide enough that it is useful, and I'm swapping between. Unlike Bloodborne, you can't have a gun and a weapon out. You are like you're tabbing on the D-pad to swap between those, and there's, like, I don't know, half a second, so there's a little bit of a lag between the two. So the parry is usable and useful, but it does not feel. I mean, there's a way that FromSoft does it, which is like when you hit a parry, there's like clunk. You know, what I mean, there's like there's a visual confirmation, an auditory confirmation. Like everything about the game's like the game is coalescing to let you know you did something interesting.
Right.
You see the enemy stagger back, like knee down, and here like they get thrown back and they fall on the ground. But also the throw is like far enough so that you can't really like pummel them after the fact. It's like they're kind of out of your attack range, or at least kind of the short range claws that I'm using. So no, like it's an option. It is definitely a play style that is if not encouraged, then definitely usable. But it lacks that kind of specificity that you get out of a Souls combat, but in the looseness, I have found like it's interesting to play a game in which I'm loading up my inventory and I am using flame grenades and I am using frost grenades and I am going back to the bonfire equivalent and stocking up on that. And I have enjoyed that, whether it's enough to get me past hour 8, which is like usually what happens with these games, is I'm interested. It doesn't help that I just finished Elden Ring, so I put in a ton of hours into one of these. And that would be true whether it was made by From Software or not. It's an extremely similar game with some different approaches on gameplay. But so frequently, and this is true, I know you've championed the Surge, and I believe you, but so frequently what happens to me with these games is, well, boy, From Software makes these games fast enough that if I just take a little break, there'll be another one to play. And I'd rather take it from the studio that is, you know, the proven commodity. And so these games are always like, I'm just going to get a little taste. Like, you know, I still do I like how this plays. I like these types of games. And so the question for me is, can Steelrising get past the 8 to 10 hour mark where it's like, yeah, I'm good. Like I don't need any more of this. I'll wait till From Software announces whatever's next. And I can't answer that quite yet.
But one thing I do, like, if the game opens up and starts like, surprise, it's a choice-driven RPG, I am dying to know.
Because, I will let you know.
Like,
I'm going to play far.
My little killer robot, my little French Revolutionary RoboCop, like, then I'm all in. Yes. So that's kind of like, because, I was kind of in the same place where it's like, combat's fine. And it's got kind of a cool look and vibe in this game, but like, I don't know if that's going to carry me through a long game. But the minute it's like, but will I turn my wrist blades loose for Danton? Now we're talking.
Well, yeah, because that's one direction that I've not seen anyone really take this style of combat, is plunk it into a full-on RPG. Now, granted, the Souls games have plenty of RPG elements, but like the side quests are opaque. There are no function like real dialogue choices. Like it has a very specific house style, and I would love if this combat, like I played Greedfall, like the combat was, you know what I mean? Like it was fine, but this combat is a lot better. And if you just dropped this into a world that had, give me big dialogue trees, like just go all out, that I think that could be potentially interesting, as opposed to what so frequently these games slot into, which is slightly tweaked combat in a novel setting. And it's just unclear to me if Steelrising gets past that. It probably also doesn't help that maybe Spiders is making multiple games at once, but it seems like a weird pivot. Like it's like what I don't see a whole lot of what they learned from Greedfall like explicitly transferring to the game they built here. So maybe there are multiple teams and they're building another like full-on RPG. I don't know the whole scale of the studio, but it's interesting.
So I'm looking at their upcoming. They have announced Greedfall 2, The Dying World, for 2024.
Okay.
Well then, so this is like a second team. So that makes more sense.
I feel like I did remember they had a slasher team somewhere in there, because was something of fire or
yes, they have Bound by Flame. So basically, looking at their one, this is a fascinating list of releases. Release number 1, 2009, Sherlock Holmes versus Jack the Ripper.
Wait, what?
Wait, what?
Wait, that's not a Frogwares game?
Nope.
What?
Sherlock Holmes versus Jack the Ripper was made by Spiders.
Cool.
Published by Focus Home Interactive in 2009.
That one was all right. That was good. I remember that being good.
As was The Testament of Sherlock Holmes. They made that one too, 2012.
Okay, this is a regular Sherlock
This
Holmes
is
game.
fucking me up. Yeah, okay, no, I'm seeing like this is on my Steam library. It's credited to Frogware, so I wonder if they did like a co-development or like a publishing deal.
Yeah,
Frogware's working with spiders is the ultimate. Oh, the game is
That's
awesome.
my multiverse of madness. Yeah.
So, Spiders were the 360 devs.
Aha.
Spiders made the 360 game. Then they made Mars War Logs, a game that I remember playing in 2013.
I definitely remember some people trying to be like, you should give Mars War Logs a shot, and I was like, not with that name, but I'm glad you're having fun.
Then Bound by Flame in 2014.
One of the worst E3 presentations I've ever attended.
Then The Technomancer in 2016. And then finally Greedfall in 2019. What a fascinating studio. Wait.
I'm sad that Sherlock Holmes versus Jack the Ripper isn't some sort of either beat 'em up or fighting game.
I agree. Wait, Rob, what is the Bound by Flame E3 presentation?
It was a briefing in which they introduced us to the concept of a loot box. Which I guess at the time was more novel, but it was seriously, and our game has the things RPG gamers love. Loot and treasure chests. We combine them. You're welcome. And I swear to God, that is basically what I remember being it. And I remember like me and a bunch of other journalists looking at each other being like, did we seriously book a half-hour appointment for this guy to show us like their randomized treasure chest loot distribution table? It was grim. It was like it seemed fine if a bit dull, but the fact that they were like really front loading this aspect was pretty dire, but also kind of endearing because like they were very stoked about the way they were like doing loot and what you'd be getting out of these treasure chests. And like it was sort of a purity of enthusiasm that I could not ever imagine having for like a basic thing like that. But there it was. It was a very long presentation for that point. Let's see. I am gonna have to run here in like 10 minutes to go yell at some folks. Do we want to wrap up the show, or should I just bow out?
No, we went long yesterday. What do you want to pull like one or two questions and then we'll cut out?
Here's
I say we went long yesterday. We're recording this podcast in 2 parts. I should point out.
Yeah. We are past the 2-hour mark, so like we're fine to wrap whenever.
Hey, DW from Seattle writes with what I think is a great question. So we all know that Rob has lots of hobbies and interests, but do any of the other members of the Waypoint have any? It certainly seems like the other folks just aren't as interested in all the nuance and beauty life has to offer as Rob is. Thanks, DW from Seattle.
God.
It's a great question. I like certainly I can't. I'm biased, but I do think DW is onto something. I didn't ruin our question bucket. It was simply my joie de vivre. Patrick, you play more Steelrising, you'll learn what joie de vivre is.
I'm not sure I will.
I feel like you just read a question that was designed to dunk on us.
What?
No. If you took offense to that, you took Rob's bait. That bounced right off.
All right, fine. Well, here's a real question.
I mean, I have an answer. I like to do photography at climbing. Moving on.
Kato, do you have a joie de vivre? Do you have interest in the finer things?
Yeah, I mean, I went and saw a cool show at the Guggenheim over the weekend. That's probably my thing. See things that I'm in New York.
You win by default. You just live in New York.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Like,
you just go places.
I'm getting worked here.
Yeah.
I could go to the New England Quilt Museum.
Also, I do like making nice coffee in my AeroPress. I share this with Rob.
Yeah.
I like a good AeroPress.
I just need to put like some sort of cowbell on the AeroPress like cap because it's always vanishing. And that's the one frustrating thing. All right.
Yeah.
Chris writes, Hi, Waypoint crew. Rob's invitation for actual gaming questions inspired me to finally email in. I recently completed a full playthrough of the Homeworld Deserts of Karak campaign and absolutely loved it. Rob is right. It is a great RTS. What really struck me is how quickly and deeply its art and music grabbed me. So much so that after the campaign, I went online to see if there's an art book I could add to my collection. Good news! There is! Called The Art of Homeworld. It was released in 2015. The only problem is the price. As I send this, the cheapest on Amazon is $1,614.73. And, well, frankly, that 73 cents is just too much for me. My question for the crew is, what game media, art book, record, collectible, statue, etc., would you love to own but can't justify the price? If you don't have one, what prices do you just not understand? Cheers. Chris from Down Under, where it is finally warming up after a cold winter. I think for me, like I will say, art books are a good pull because there's a lot of things that I regret not grabbing. For years, my local Best Buy, like in Cambridge, had increasingly beat up collector's editions of BioShock 2, which I had not played at the time, and then I played it later and I was like, that game ruled. But then two, they were collector's editions. They had like a big, beautiful art book to go with them. And in retrospect, wish I'd snagged that. But I think art books in general are things that I very rarely regret picking up. Like if you go see a cool museum exhibit, I think those like limited run, like exhibit art books are probably one of the better things you can get from the gift shop, because they go out of print. Yeah. And it turns out that like getting that stuff together again would be much harder for you. So
they start expensive though. Like they start expensive though.
They do. But it does not
easily
get
$100. No, it gets worse. It gets much worse. Rob, you mentioning BioShock 2 reminded me that I never played BioShock 2, but I did heavily follow the BioShock 2 ARG. And I'm curious what some of the pieces from that ARG go for these days, because there was a vinyl that I have. $140. Sick. Wait, no, that's not it. That's the wrong vinyl. They sent out like vinyls that were part of the puzzle. I'm like, I don't think anyone's selling theirs. That's interesting.
I have a handful of art books, but the problem is then they just live underneath something and never get, or like you try and arrange it next to a toilet or something. Like maybe sometime I'll look at this, and then just it doesn't. Like I've gotten a hand, like one of the ones I do really like is like when I get into like a mythology of something, like they're not art books necessarily, but like almost encyclopedias. There's a thing called like Lostopedia, which is just like index of like all the mythology of that show. And like, I enjoy like parsing through that occasionally, like reminding myself of the bits of the show that I don't remember anymore. But, and I always admired, actually, speaking of Souls, like the Souls art books always look tremendous. I'm never gonna look at it. And I don't have like, part of it's kids, but also just I don't have a great way to display it. So just like sits on a shelf that no one's going to look at. So that's how it kind of exits my trajectory as something interesting. That said, it's also hard to, you mentioned Rob being able to find things for cheap. Like finding that stuff like in bargain bins, like just doesn't really exist anymore. Like everything is so becomes a collector's item. It's important to someone. And so, especially because of my aversion to like spending for like boutique items, you can't find stuff like that like at a GameStop in a bargain bin. It's like, oh shit, like this thing's marked down to $7. Yeah, okay, I'll get that. It's like, no, that thing is going to be $700 5 years later on eBay, and I'm never going to touch it.
Mine has to be fashion. Like if a game has good like fashion, I will pick it up. Like my Disco Elysium jacket is hanging on the wall behind me. And like that is my thing. If a game releases like really good fashion, which is extremely rare, I will pick it up if I really love it. God, I can't think of trying to think of anything that could get me right now.
Like a good Funko Pop?
Oh.
Natalie's not here.
What if I just started sending you Funko Pops? Well, I can't almost send them to Natalie because she'll proudly display them.
Yeah, she just enjoy them.
That's beyond the point. I need these to be objects of shame.
You need to curse people with Funko Pops.
I'd weep. Negative.
Guilty Gear
Derogatory.
Strive Funko Pop.
Does that exist?
I did actually recently buy a Guilty Gear Strive plushie on stream because I was told about this Guilty Gear Strive plushie while I was doing my sets, and I was like, oh, cool. I am going to order this before I am screwed over. And so now I have a little Ray plushie on the way, which I'm extremely excited about.
All right. I think we will leave it there. There's one more I'm keen to get to. It's a really good story, but I don't think I have time to read it. So we'll have to tune back on it. Tune back in on that email very, very soon. Remember, you can send us all your questions at gaming@vice.com with the subject line questions. That's a wrap on today's episode of Waypoint Radio. If you want more from Waypoint, you can follow us on Twitter at Waypoint, Facebook, and YouTube, Waypoint Vice. You can follow me on Twitter at Rob Zachney. Ricardo, where can people follow you?
At @a_Cotto_appears.
Patrick.
At Patrick Klubbock.
Ren.
At Ren or Raven.
You can also check out what we published on waypoint.vice.com. I think this week, Ren has been continuing on the multiverses beat, and Kato wants everyone to make sure that they see the very good deck Ren put on her story about Velma and one of the quirks of her kit in multiverses. So check that out on waypoint.vice.com.
Pickles.
As far as streams, I'll actually have an update for our stream schedule for off the air. But thanks to Waypoint Plus, we streamed a whole bunch last week. I think Patrick has completed his triumph.
The world's in
over-
flames. Welcome to the new age.
We'd love to see a frenzy of flames and a glorious rebirth. And next Monday, of course, Motorsports Monday will return. As I think we'll probably pick up Oberhof Racing and see how that new car comes together. For Waypoint Plus listeners, they will get to hear us discuss, I think, this Prometheus, right, Kano?
Yeah, that's today when we're
That's
recording
today.
this. Yes, I'm finishing that as soon as we get off this call.
Man, those lucky people with those Waypoint Plus subscriptions who just get to hear the Prometheus conversation. It will hit the public feed after a week.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe it's worth going to waypointplus.com to get access to those episodes early, to get access to our premium feed, and to get access to an ad-free version of the mainline podcast. And that helps support Waypoint and everything else we do here. And also, if you want to go a bit beyond that and pick up some fine merch, you can go to waypointgeneralstore.com and buy shirts, glassware, etc. Our theme music is by Bowen. The track is Miss You off the EP Pale Machine. Learn more at waypoint.zone/BOEN. For now, we're calling time on this week. We'll talk to you again next week. Until then, fuck capitalism. Go home.
Recording started. Going to time that is an essential website that we all need, and we should all say thank you to. Everyone say thank you, time that is.
Praise be.
Thank you,
Time Dot Is. Thank you for making this podcast possible and for making
Shout out to the
job easier.
Shout out to the quote of the day. Time, the devourer of all things.
Where are you seeing
Very
this
true.
quote?
Ovid?
Scroll down.
Who's Ovid?
Oh,
Roman poet.
it's a
But it's also
classic
the
Ovid.
world's most trusted medical research platform. So, I mean, who can say what it's attributed to?
Very true.
Ovid is?
Mhm.
Feels like unfortunate branding.
I gotta believe they're not thrilled with how the last couple of years have played out. A classic name that will stand the test of
The
time.
world's most trusted medical.
When people think of Ovid, they'll be thinking health.
Oh, Lord.
I'm ready whenever.
All right. Shall we clap on 40?
Yes, we should.
Can't believe it. I think Kato's going to kill the clap, though.
It's fine. We can keep doing the clap.
I feel like its days are numbered though. But if it's vestigial, and Kato's not even using those markers,
You know, it's part of my energy process. It's part of my ramp up.
That is true.
Yeah, I think it's part of the.
We summon the pod.
Mm-hmm.
Stand in the clap circle.
Now,
right.
hey, whoa. Can we rewind about 6 seconds?
Nope.
Rob,
Nope. We're letting that sit there.
You spent a lot of time
Everybody in the clap circle.
I think people sitting in the clap circle is the problem, Rob.